Welcome to Reach, your platform to connect with other executive assistants and acquire game-changing knowledge and perspective. Reach is designed to inspire your workday, guide you through pivotal moments in your career, and transform you into the executive assistant you've always wanted to be. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Reach. This is your host, Jessica Van. I am the founder and CEO of Maven Recruiting Group. And today I am so delighted to welcome Lorynn to our program. Welcome, Lorynn.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about this. You all have helped me in so many ways, so it's an honor to be here.
Oh, that's generous. Thank you for that. I feel like we've been good to each other. So that's kind of you to say. So Lorynn is Lorynn Boland. She is not only a delightful conversationalist, as we will soon see, and instantaneously likable, as well as a pioneer of eclectic living arrangements, something that I'm sure we'll talk about at some point today. But she's also an executive assistant who has navigated both sides of the aisle, so to speak. What I mean by that is she worked for 5 years at Kleiner Perkins, which of course is a legendary venture capital firm. And now for the last 6 months or so, she's been supporting the CEO of PlanetScale, which is a database platform for developers with, as I'm sure you could guess, infinite scalability. Today, we'll be learning about Lorynn's experiences of supporting in these environments, which, while are, of course, different, are also inextricably linked and symbiotic. The relationship, of course, between portfolio companies and venture capital firms. We felt this was an important conversation to have, as there's definitely a compatibility and a common language between these respective industries, as well as some noteworthy differences. So for anyone who is listening today and is curious to understand these differences, or for someone who's maybe preparing for a job interview or a transition from one side of this industry to the next, I think today's conversation will be particularly valuable. So let's start off. Lorynn, for those who may not be as familiar, can you explain what is the nature of the relationship and this symbiosis that we talk about between venture capital firms and portfolio companies that they invest in, such as PlanetScale?
Yeah, so honestly, it really matters to venture who they're investing in, not only as in companies, but as in the people. So they care. They care about the person that they're investing in. They want the relationship to last, not only because that will help the business last, but it helps it makes it easier for the business to grow as well. If you're working with someone that you have a great relationship with, you're probably going to thrive a lot easier than working with someone that maybe you don't get along with as well. And that's not always the case, of course. But venture, they take the time to get to know people as well as their business. And I think that's really special.
And what about kind of like taking it even to a more like fundamental kind of stage of the relationship? I mean, venture capitalists obviously are investing in companies of varying degrees, right? Of varying stages of development. Can you speak a little bit to that and kind of that process of like fundraising / investing?
So when you say fundraising, do you mean fundraising on the startup side? Yes?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think integrating a relationship in the early stages is really important. Getting to know your audience on the startup side, getting to know those that are willing to invest in you before you're ready to raise, I think is important because there are so many options out there. There's different venture firms invest in different sectors, right? So you got to make sure you find the right fit. You want to find the right fit so that it's a good so that it works for you and your company and those that work for you. Because in the long run, the people that you hire, you obviously liked them and you get along. So wouldn't you want someone guiding you to also be part of that group, and you want them to be inspired by them as well? It's kind of like finding puzzle pieces, finding the right fit, finding, because there's so many firms out there, and really establishing those relationships early so that you can go on those coffee walks. You can get to know these partners and figure out what kind of amazing deals they're making to change the future, and which fund do you want to be a part of so that your company can change the future as well.
Yes, I love that. And I agree. I think that there's a huge relationship component. And I mean, also just, the relationship between the venture capital firm and the portfolio company goes well beyond just the money exchange, so to speak, right? It's not just financial support, it's everything you just said. It's relationship support, it's advisory, it's counsel, it's expertise, it's so many things. So that sense of like connection and rapport and chemistry is super duper vital to the longevity of that. So now I'd love for you to unpack what a typical day looked like for you as an executive assistant at KP versus what it looks like now as an EA who is supporting the CEO of a Series C startup.
It is definitely different. But I'm so happy that I was able to learn from those at Kleiner and use the tools that I gained and use them at PlanetScale. So a day at Kleiner, I would say, is very focused on your particular person or team that you're supporting. And so if I was supporting one general partner, my whole focus is him, which is the same at PlanetScale, but Kleiner has a whole team that helps support him in other ways, such as a massive finance team, right? Which I'm not part of finance, and I don't do finance at PlanetScale, but the finance team is smaller. So it's, and also the legal teams. The legal team is larger at Kleiner. So I see myself passing along NDAs more often versus at Kleiner, there's different teams for that. The startup world versus the VC world, it's just the establishment. It's the process is that you give your all to one person so that they can thrive and make the best decisions and investments that they can. You make their life easier for them, which is the same in startup world as well. But that's the goal, right? To make someone's life easy as an EA so that they can thrive. Because that's why we're all here. Because we want to be here. We want to work hard. We want to see everyone grow. And if you're not being that person for the person you're supporting, then they're not going to be able to do their best either. So it really matters how you show up, and just showing up and really seeing what it is that the priorities are what are most important. Those are the differences in startup versus VC. The priorities are vastly different, but the tools reflect on each side.
So when you talk about the priorities, can you kind of delve into that a little bit more and explain what you mean by that?
Priorities such as maintaining relationships with your existing network so that there's more potential to expand in the future on VC. But that also reflects in startup worlds too. It's really complicated and most things are confidential, so I don't want to share too much. But there was a lot of event planning that I saw happen on the marketing side that I also got to slightly be a part of. And when those events were coming up, that was really top priority because those networking events are really special, and the marketing team at KP is fantastic and they do an exceptional job. But when those types of events come up during the time of year, or when the VC firm is fundraising for their own fund, that is top priority. And that looks a lot different than going to fundraise at a startup, right? Because at a startup, you're showing you're showing your board what you've been achieving. And it's the same at VC, but it's a lot more money. So you have to be very diligent and very almost like head down and focused, because there's not really room for mistake, even though there is, and everyone is forgiving. It's, you want to do your best. You're working with the top of the top, and that's just that's how it goes.
Mm-hmm. And you're referring to VC in
Yeah,
when you say
and
that, correct? Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you say top of the top, I mean, not everybody, I think, understands kind of what those LPs, who is comprised among those LPs, what sort of the level of discourse and exchanges at that level. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that? Like kind of who a typical LP might be, without obviously naming names, but kind of what that type of individual or type of organization might be?
Yeah, those that have experience so much in finance, I won't say specifically who, of course, but that have so much knowledge that are actually advising the partners. They need leaders too. VC partners need leaders that they can count on as well. So it's almost the same as a startup. Like they want the right LPs too, just like a CEO of a startup wants the right investor. It's a matter of the relationship that they continue to build over time, and that they continue that those relationships keep coming back, right? Because they keep building on those relationships. Like I stated, when you're going into, as a startup, if you're going to start fundraising, it's good to start before you're fundraising, because you want to build those relationships. And it's shown at Kleiner that they're trusted. They deserve to be trusted. So
Yeah. So you mentioned that there's a lot of differences too. I'm curious. I'm curious if you've noticed a difference in kind of the complexity of what your executive within KP was managing versus what your executive, of course, the CEO that you're supporting right now, is managing in terms of like, yeah, I think the word I'm thinking of is complexity, right? Like, is their scope different? Are there more irons in their fire, so to speak, in one industry versus another? Um, what does that differential look like?
yeah, so I think that the scope, it's definitely different, but the amount of work I would say is the same. So in VC, you are helping your partner manage X amount of boards, right? So you talk to X amount of EAs that support all of these CEOs, and you have to figure out how to organize that and how to make sure that your partner is also organized and not missing anything. And what is top priority? Who should he be talking to, or she be talking to, in regards to possible new companies or existing companies that are getting off their feet or are getting ready to fundraise? Who, it is really important to pay attention to what the main focus in each quarter is, even each week it comes down to, because each week is different. Versus startup world, there's so many fires to put out, but not in a bad way. There's just always something brewing, you could say. So there's a million things to be working on to make sure that the company is successful. And so that's the difference. It's being on a board on X amount of boards, or putting out X amount of fires. Because on the investor side, yes, they see those fires, but the company is working on them, and the investor is there to guide them. And so you
Yes.
see, yeah, so you see each side of it. And that's why it's so important to pick the right investor, because you want someone that can guide you to put out those fires, someone that you feel like you
Yeah.
can rely on. Who can I call that? Who can be my
Exactly.
firefighter, right?
Right?
And yeah,
Yeah. You want that seasoned fireman that's been through a lot of different blazes, ideally. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. That's why
Yeah.
Kleiner is
So that's really
great.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like that. I like that idea because I think, you know, of being when you're this idea of being like, so to speak, in the fire. Like I think that the issues that you're solving when you're on the operator side, the portfolio company side, like you're in the mix. You are right in the middle of it all. You are front and center. You're not 1 degree removed. And I think that that's kind of what I feel is maybe one of the differences that you're identifying, is that as an investor, as a VC, you're not necessarily in the trenches in real time battling it out, but you are very much advising. But it's a different, I feel like it's a different stance and a different point of view on the situation, right, as opposed to being right in the thick of it.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. I think that as well. And that's at least what I've seen. I'm not an investor, so I can't say exactly that that is correct or not correct, because and I think every investor has a different relationship. I guarantee there's investors out there that are in the fires with the company, right? But in my experience, I who I have supported in the past, I know that the CEOs that he was on boards for, they trusted him to be the guy that they reach out to be that advisor, to give them the guidance that they needed at that time. And I think every company is different. I think every relationship is different. And I think that maybe an investor that maybe he or she is not in working on every fire deep in the trenches, but maybe there's a company that comes along that they want to be putting out those fires with them because they believe in them that much.
Yeah. Great. So what to what extent did your time at KP prepare you for your role at PlanetScale? And I guess kind of follow up is, has your exposure to things like deal flow and financing and just understanding the way that venture capitalists think, and their objectives, like, has that given you any particular advantages in your current role, or allowed you to be impactful in maybe particular or even unexpected ways?
I think that being at Kleiner definitely has put my mind at ease being on the startup side, because I do know the direction that companies go through during their growth stages or moving from Series B to Series C to growth. And being on the other end of it, when you're in the startup world and you've never experienced the VC world, it might seem really scary, right? Because you might be questioning, is this going to work? And you're going to always question that. And if you're not, then work harder, because you want to always push yourself. You want to make sure it works, because every day matters. That's a PlanetScale. That's our motto. And so I think that, yes, being at KP definitely has helped me ease my mind to believe in PlanetScale even more than if I hadn't had been on the startup side. I mean, on the VC side to begin with.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's, excuse me, really good perspective, because it's not always a linear path in startup. It's not uncommon at all. I mean, I certainly our clients and the executives that we speak with tell me that all the time. We started off with XYZ as our go-to market strategy, or we thought that we were going to, stand for this and that, and this was going to be our primary product. But then we realized that that doesn't actually sell, or that, that was too complicated of a path. So we had to pivot or change or whatever. So it's not necessarily this like very straightforward, predictable, linear course. So I think, like you said, knowing that, having seen that and seeing that it's not uncommon that startups might be kind of bobbing and weaving and figuring it out, it's not necessarily like jarring to you, and you sort of expect it, which I think is like super useful for just managing your expectations of working in a portfolio company. Do you feel like the fact that and we're on the inside track of all that, like, do you feel like your CEO has benefited from that in any way? Like, have you been able to be useful, maybe just in terms of like I don't know, navigating fundraising rounds or things like that because of this KP knowledge that you bring?
I definitely have brought knowledge from KP to meetings at PlanetScale when talks with investors have come up. And it's nice to know the lingo, I would say, to know what people are talking about, because not everyone knows the lingo of VC or what even a Series B or Series C is if you don't work in tech or you have never fundraised before. So I'm really grateful for knowing and learning so much from Kleiner. And I think that me being at PlanetScale probably eases Sam, my boss, the CEO of PlanetScale, his mind as well, knowing that the person supporting him was supporting those on the other side. Because the
Mm-hmm.
whole goal is to have a team that's here to support you so that we can all achieve greatness. And in order to do that, we all have to have a similar mindset, and that is to work hard and to use the tools that we've been given and that we've learned from our past experiences.
Yeah. So now that you've been on both sides, or in both environments, I should say, what are some of the unique challenges or unique demands of each sector?
You know, I think that my favorite issue that I've been working out is that how to create an organized background for my CEO, because at Kleiner it was kind of already established where you had all these platforms and tools to go reflect on to grab information from that were for internal resources or information that you might need. That's very random things. I'm talking things like the phone number for the landlord, right? Like creating almost like a Bible for Sam, that let's say I went on vacation and or I'm not a mother and I don't plan to be for a few years, but let's say I went on maternity leave, creating a almost a Bible that you can hand over to a temp EA and say, "Hey, all of the information is here for you." Having set up a situation so that anyone is set up for success, but you're also setting yourself up for success. And so that is something that I think that I've pulled over to PlanetScale that I got to learn from the best from at KP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's not uncommon. Some of the differences that we hear about are that, that structure is often kind of the last thing that people are thinking about, in the startup world, that they're thinking about all these other things first, right? Where are we going to get the money from? How are we going to how are we going to keep the investors happy? Let's make sure we get the product right. How do we hire and build this thing? How do we attract the right talent? How do we keep the right talent? So I feel like there's this concern over kind of we've been using this analogy of fires. I feel like there's this concern over like these immediate fires, and then things like structure and clarity, clear process, defined process, documented process. I feel like that tends to come a lot later, which is a really good call out on your part, because I do think that there's some personality dynamics that work better in more structured versus less structured places.
Yes, I agree with that too. But I think that having structure really allows you to set a foundation for the company. And without a strong foundation, you might crumble eventually. So, really setting yourself up for success in all ways so that you never have to guess or you're never having to dig for information that you might need on demand, setting yourself up in a way that you're ready for anything that comes your way.
Yeah. So again, thinking about your experiences as an EA, have you noticed any differences when it comes to things like, pace, like the pace of the organization, the pace of change, the pace of decision making, so things like that, or maybe like the variety or the type of work that you do, things like personality, cultural differences? Like, I'd love to to get your insights on those types of things?
The pace is so the pace at PlanetScale is going to be different because it's a fully remote company, but it is demanding, and I wouldn't say that it's not. It is just as fast paced as Kleiner, in my opinion, because we're solving issues and we're helping to solve issues for others as well. And we want others to succeed. And that's why they choose PlanetScale so that they don't crash and fail. So we have to make sure that we are working extra, extra hard to prove that loyalty and that trustworthiness so that companies continue to come back to us, and also tell other CEOs, hey, you should use PlanetScale because they really had my back and they're alleviating stress from us. So the pace is just the same, because on the other side in VC, they're constantly looking for that next unicorn or that next great thing. And it can slip between your fingers if you're not paying attention. So you have to be on your game. You have to be on top of it. I can say there were odd hours that I worked in VC, but that's because there's opportunities and you don't want to miss out on them. And if you have a positive outlook on that form of situation, saying, hey, maybe you're at EA and your boss texted you late night on a Friday, hey, something urgent just came in. Can we please get it on the books on Monday? It should be a heck yes, because that means it could be an amazing opportunity for everyone. So it's a matter of your mindset. And if you're going into the mindset of the pace for the startup world or the VC world very positively, and knowing that your hard work is for the greater good, I think that the pace is fine, regardless what it is.
Mm-hmm.
You are able to
Yeah.
manage it.
Now, what about the variety and the type of work, things like that?
So the work is definitely a bit different. At Kleiner, I also helped with doing some internal events and swag, which I'm actually getting to do at PlanetScale as well, which is exciting. So I did wear many hats at Kleiner, which I don't think all EAs do get to experience. So I'm a unique case because I did have the title of operations lead at one point, which I was helping more with facilities operations in that aspect, because I helped with Kleiner's remodel, which helped me learn a lot about the building. So I was able to talk on issues that came up. So my situation is a bit different, but I get to use those tools now over in the startup world, because when we do get an office one day, I get to help with that. And I know how to work with contractors. I know I started at the front desk at Kleiner, and I was I learned so much there as well, doing the catering for everyone, doing making sure the kitchens were immaculate and beautiful and welcoming, and being kind to all the new CEOs walking through the door. So I really went through all phases of life, if you will, at Kleiner, where I started at the front desk, moved to EA, and then ended up getting to help with operations on a facilities level. And now I think that was a big part of why I was chosen for PlanetScale, because I'm going to be able to wear those hats again. And I'm going to be able to use the knowledge that I learned when there are offices or when things come up that might not be your typical EA work of calendaring and scheduling. And because travel, scheduling, expenses, that's all standard, right? That's what you expect. But if you're supporting the CEO or a partner, you're going to have other things to do. And if you go into the job with an open mind and open to any opportunities and saying yes to projects that I never thought I would be working on swag at Kleiner Perkins, but I did, and it was amazing and I loved it. And now I
Mm-hmm.
get to work with marketing at PlanetScale on swag. I might have not have had that opportunity if I hadn't have said yes at Kleiner.
What about this is one I'm particularly curious about. I think there's definitely some stereotypes about personality, cultural differences, right, between venture and startup. I'd love to know what your experience of those differences has been, if there are even differences.
I think it's a matter of how you want to show up as yourself. And I have found that in startup, I do show up a little bit differently, almost more myself than I did in VC. But I think that I could have done that the whole time. I think everything is a learning lesson. You have to show up professionally, right? Always. And because it's business and it's your job. But it has been interesting working for Sam because I will do some personal assistant stuff for him from time to time and work with him in San Francisco, and I'll show up in a tie-dye t-shirt, which I probably would not have done at Kleiner.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely would have not gone into the office at Kleiner with a tie-dye t-shirt on. but
No.
but that's the difference. I'm not going into the office. I'm going to his house to help with some personal things. So the cultural differences are, for VC, it matters. First impressions matter, and they should matter for everyone. And if you really put your integrity into making sure you're leaving a lasting impression that is positive and impactful, then it's going to attract those types of people through your door who are also positive and impactful. So, and that's something I saw and I really cherished at Kleiner is they really cared. They cared about the little details because little details matter. How you show up matters, how you present yourself matters. And if you want to call it cultural differences of showing up to my boss's house in a tie-dye t-shirt versus showing up dressed very professionally at Kleiner Perkins, it's not that I'm not showing up professionally. It's knowing what you're showing up for and showing up fully in an authentic way, that how you want to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
that everyone should
And
do that all the time anyways.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's different, again, like there's different expectations for what is appropriate or not appropriate or whatever. So it's a matter of just having the I guess intelligence and also just the awareness to calibrate and know what's going to work one place and not going to work some other place, you know?
Absolutely.
So, what have been the most significant adjustments or even the most maybe significant learning moments that you've had supporting a CEO for the first time and also working in a startup for the first time? And I think, like, I don't know, maybe there's a particular incident or situation that you can recall that might really help our listeners to kind of understand what that learning curve has been like for you.
I think that the most significant adjustment for me is when I was at Kleiner, I felt like I was learning from everyone around me. And I feel like on the startup side, you have to acknowledge that everyone is still learning. So you're learning together. So when I was at Kleiner, I had so many people to look up to that had been there for years and were great teachers. Whereas on the startup side, you might end up being that teacher. So
Mhm.
that's the significant difference. And that's the adjustment that I'm calibrating on right now, of having compassion always when you realize people are just figuring something out really quick, and to be patient because
Mm.
we'll all figure it out. It all works out. You have to
Yeah.
trust your team. You have to trust everyone. You have to build everyone up, be positive, give good feedback so that you can all win.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really an interesting observation. I hadn't thought about it in that way, but that really does make a lot of sense. Like, you know, it could very well be your executive's first time doing this. It could very well be your head of marketing's first time doing this. It could very well be your chief people officer's first time doing this when you're in a startup environment. And that's definitely a different level of um, it's just different. It just changes it, and it's also maybe might require a different level of compassion. That's a
Exactly.
really yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very good observation. So, okay, switching gears a little bit, Lorynn, and we kind of started as we were waiting before our podcast to start. We kind of chatted about this a little bit, but you've managed to straddle, not just both sides of the aisle professionally, but you also do this personally. And you live what some people would consider kind of like, I put this in quotations, like kind of this alternative lifestyle, right? As, somewhat nomadic. Like I know you have anchor points, but you have also kind of some fluidity and kind of digital nomad tendencies, as well as like being a part-time DJ, right? That operates out of her camper van sometimes. But you also hold down this really demanding and admirable career working for, a startup and the CEO nonetheless. So can you tell us a little bit about your lifestyle and also, how you've set yourself up to accommodate a really thriving career as well as having the ability to really live life on the terms that you want to live it on?
Yeah, my life is a bit different, I would say. I do live a little bit of a nomadic lifestyle. I have a place in San Francisco. I have a place in the foothills of the Tahoe National Forest. I do have a camper van that I just bought that I'm very excited about. It actually needs a little bit of work, so she's on hold for a moment, but we love her. She's beautiful. And my boyfriend and I have a truck with a pop-up camper on it that we also have established Starlink onto. So we take Starlink with us wherever we go if we go camping so that we can both work remotely in beautiful places. So first, I would say putting your career first, I think, is really important. I think people try to fight the urge of, do I follow my passions or do I do this steady career that feels stable and safe? And my answer is, I think you can do both. But I think that you need to be really grateful for the stable career because it's going to give you that foundation you need so that you can have fun on the side. And I think if you change your outlook to that, then you can actually follow your dreams simultaneously. Which I grew up with a family that was very involved in music. My real father's side, he grew up with the Allman Brothers. So my uncle played with them on their first album. My great grandmother had a TV show in Georgia and hosted Little Richard on her TV show. I think she was the first person to ever host him. And so I do have this music inspiration in my soul. And I would love that I am able to DJ on the side and know that because I have this amazing career, I'm able to do this on this side and I don't have to rely on DJing for money, right? Because that's really hard and that is a hard life. And it takes a lot of dedication and passion and steadiness to achieve that. And having a job as an EA is my steadiness, is my rock. It keeps me grounded. It gives me that security that I'm forever grateful for. And I wouldn't give it up for the world. And I love that I can do both. I love that I'm about to go to Washington and go to the Gorge Amphitheater next weekend. I get to do that because I have Starlink on the truck and I can work on the road trip. And I have a remote job where I get to do that. Even if you don't have a remote job and you have an amazing job that allows you to have PTO and you can still go experience that as long as you figure out your own balance because everyone's balance is different and this happens to be my balance. And that's why
Yeah.
it will look
Yeah.
different for everyone. That's why my life, it might sound weird to some, but for me, it's what works.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's life on your terms and on life's terms, which I love. And I have a feeling that we're going to get a lot more people calling us asking for 100% remote jobs. Thanks to this description of your lifestyle. But the reality is that there are definitely, as you described, like there's definitely remote first companies and companies that that provide that, and there's a lot of companies that are hybrid, and as well as those that are full time, right, in office. But I guess I'm curious, like, do you feel like your lifestyle developed as a result of the type of work that you found, meaning like this 100% remote role, or did you select your role um, to complement the lifestyle that you had already had and you wanted to be able to maintain? Like, what came first, chicken or the egg?
I've been reflecting on this a lot recently, so I'm really happy you asked, because when I look back on my life 5, 6 years ago, I was figuring it out. I was like, what do I want to do? But before that mark, I always knew I wanted to work remote, but I never knew what would get me there. Because I grew up in Atlanta, I grew up on the East Coast. The tech world is not, almost doesn't exist. So the opportunities that I've been given living in California have literally changed my life. If I hadn't have moved to California, I don't know where I would be. And because I had that intention of, I knew that one day I wanted a remote job, and that I knew the type of lifestyle that I wanted, being able to be nomadic, that was already subconsciously in my mind for at least the last 8 years. So Kleiner I actually got recruited to work at Kleiner as front desk reception, which led me to being an EA and doing all the other things. But I definitely took every single opportunity at Kleiner I could to learn and grow. And once I got to a point after the pandemic, so the pandemic, we worked remote, right? And I ended up buying a house with my partner up in the foothills by Tahoe National Forest, like I mentioned. And I realized I loved it here. And I had to make a hard decision of, what do I want my future to look like? Do I want to move back to San Francisco full time, or do I want to continue living on 5 acres, which is a very different lifestyle? I'm so remote. I don't have Instacart. I don't even have DoorDash at my house, but I sacrifice that because I have this really beautiful home that actually used to be a yoga studio, and I teach yoga on the side as well. So it really sits well with me that this is where I'm experiencing life. And so I had to make that hard decision. And it's not the same decision for everyone. Hybrid is awesome. If I was still based in San Francisco, I probably would have never left Kleiner, to be honest, because I love Kleiner. I really support them, and I think they're amazing people. But it depends on your own path and what it is you want. So because I already had that intention of working remote, and then there came an opportunity for me to decide, do I stay at Kleiner, or do I let go and just trust the process that something right will come to me? I had to choose that. I had to make that decision. And I'm so happy I did. And it's really funny because you all didn't even realize, you called me actually to see if Kleiner was hiring.
I remember it was Jill.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. I answered the phone. I was like, "Who's calling me?" And I answered, and they asked, "Is Kleiner hiring right now?" And I just giggled, and I was like, "Actually, are you hiring right now?" Because I
Right.
just left Kleiner, and
Yep.
I didn't even know PlanetScale is what I was looking for, but it ended up being another great decision in my life and just part of my path. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember Jill telling me when she spoke with you, and she was like, "Oh, you're not hiring?" She's like, "Well, what are you up to?" And the rest is history. Yeah, for sure. So I love that. It sounds like you always had a vision for where you wanted, how you wanted to live, and it sounds like, I mean, for as it did for many of us, like in some ways, this transition, this mass transition to more flexible work, including hybrid and remote schedules, really benefited you because it kind of opened up that that portal officially for you, and really in a scale that wasn't previously available.
Yes.
I mean, just I've been in recruiting now for, gosh, I mean, a long time, like 15, 16 years. And I mean, remote did not exist really for, at least for executive assistants. Maybe it did for other types of professionals, but it didn't really exist for executive assistants at all until a couple of years ago. And then in mass, really that was really, pandemic. That was a consequence of the pandemic. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree with that as well, because like I said, when I first had that thought of wanting to work remote, I wasn't sure what that was going to look like. And that did change with the pandemic, like you just stated.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So I have a final question for you, Lorynn, and that's the same question we ask of everyone, which is if you could support anyone in the world throughout the course of history, who would you choose and why?
If I could support anyone throughout the course of history, I would support Michelangelo, because he really blows my mind. That he was a sculptor, a painter, an architect. He wore all the hats, and he thrived wearing all of them. I think that he likely had one of the most brilliant minds to exist. He's up there for sure, and I think it would be an amazing experience to even just follow him and shadow him and learn from all of his greatness and talent.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is one of the things that I think is so beautiful about the EA role is the chance to like align to the most interesting, brilliant, visionary, innovative people, right? I mean, not always, not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time, and like you say, like really choosing that relationship and thinking about it from that perspective of being able to really shadow and observe and learn from some of the best. So that I like that. That makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that if anyone is looking to move into the EA world or figuring out their next steps, keeping that exact thing in mind, that you are working with these brilliant minds and innovators, and it's so cool. And there's just endless opportunities.
Yeah. Love that. What is your DJ name, Lorynn?
My DJ name is Guppy, like a fish.
That's great. Well, I'm sure people will be curious to check out more of your background and more of your life. It's really such a pleasure talking to you. I just love the eclecticness that you bring and just the spirit that you bring and the energy that you bring and the positivity. It's really refreshing, and it doesn't surprise me that you've gone as far as you have because you just seem to approach things with a really joyful, positive outlook. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, sharing your life, your journey with us. This has really been a lovely conversation.
This has been great. I really appreciate you as well. And thank you for helping me land PlanetScale. I can't thank you enough.
Reach is brought to you by Maven Recruiting Group, who specializes in placing executive assistants and support staff to the Bay Area's most prominent executives and companies. If you've enjoyed being part of our podcast community and are interested in becoming part of our candidate community, we're currently hiring for roles in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and Los Angeles. You can visit us at www.mavenrec.com to see some of the roles we're currently working on and to submit your resume.